Eastern Front, July 1943. A Soviet reconnaissance patrol, operating deep behind enemy lines in the Kursk salient, observed a German freight train of unusual length halted on a rarely used spur line. The sheer number of wagons, a reported 48 flat cars and boxcars according to the patrol leader's initial field report, suggested a significant logistical movement. Yet no guards were visible, and the train appeared abandoned, a perplexing anomaly that immediately raised the stakes for the small unit. Such a target, seemingly unguarded, presented both a tantalizing opportunity for disruption and a profound tactical riddle in a sector where every German asset was fiercely protected. Sergeant Major Ivan Volkov, a seasoned scout with 5 years of frontline experience, moved his 5-man team closer under the cover of a dense pine thicket. His mission had been to identify enemy troop concentrations and armor deployments in preparation for the coming Soviet offensive, and this stationary train, stretching nearly a kilometer, presented an unexpected and potentially vital intelligence target. The initial assessment, based on visual observation from a distance of 800 meters, indicated a mixture of standard rolling stock, some open, some closed, all seemingly inert and devoid of activity, a stark contrast to the typical heavily guarded German supply convoys. Volkov, a veteran of numerous deep penetration missions, felt a prickle of unease at the apparent lack of security. German logistics, particularly for high-value assets, were notoriously meticulous, often employing dedicated security platoons for train movements through contested territory. The absence of even a single sentry or anti-aircraft emplacement suggested either a deliberate trap or a catastrophic oversight, neither of which sat comfortably with Volkov's understanding of Wehrmacht discipline. His team's primary objective was information gathering, not direct engagement, but the sheer scale of the train demanded closer inspection. The patrol advanced cautiously, utilizing the undulating terrain and patches of scrub brush for concealment, closing the distance to 300 meters. Through his Zeiss 8x binoculars, Volkov meticulously scanned each wagon, searching for any sign of movement, any glint of steel that might betray a hidden gun crew or a camouflaged position. The flat cars were draped with tarpaulins, secured by ropes, their contents obscured, while the boxcars presented an unbroken expanse of riveted steel. The train itself was painted in the standard German Dunkelgrau, faded and streaked with grime from its journey, blending subtly with the muted tones of the summer landscape. The spur line itself, overgrown with weeds and showing signs of infrequent use, further deepened the mystery. It branched off the main supply artery approximately 5 kilometers to the west, a route typically reserved for temporary storage or the offloading of bulk materials not requiring rapid transit. The positioning of such a lengthy and potentially valuable consignment on a secondary, unmonitored track was highly irregular, diverging significantly from established German operational protocols for forward supply depots. Volkov noted the track gauge was standard European, 1,435 millimeters, indicating it had originated from deeper within German-held territory, likely carrying equipment from factories or major rail hubs. His internal calculations, based on the estimated length of each flat car at 12 meters and each boxcar at 10 meters, suggested a total cargo capacity far exceeding what would be expected for a simple resupply run to a quiet sector. A train of this magnitude, if carrying armored vehicles, could transport an entire battalion of tanks or a substantial artillery battery. The silence surrounding it, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant rumble of artillery, felt increasingly unnatural, a void that spoke not of emptiness but of a carefully maintained deception. The lead scout, a veteran of the Karelian Isthmus, signaled a halt with a hand raised, his eyes fixed on the distant, stationary train. The two-car consist, a short, almost truncated presence on the single track, had been visible for nearly an hour, its outline growing steadily clearer against the snow-laden pines. No smoke plumed from its locomotive. No steam hissed, suggesting either a cold engine or a protracted stop. Unusual for a military transport moving through contested territory. Their intelligence briefing had indicated sporadic German rail movements, mostly resupply and troop rotation, but nothing of this nature, so isolated and immobile. A preliminary reconnaissance, conducted by a single scout creeping through the dense undergrowth, reported no visible guards or signs of activity. The train cars, standard German flatbeds, appeared to be covered with tarpaulins, secured by ropes that seemed almost casually tied. The scout, a young man named Piotr, with an uncanny ability to merge with the forest, had approached within 50 meters, reporting back via hand signals that the silence was absolute, broken only by the wind sifting through the branches. The absence of even a distant sentry was perplexing, almost a deliberate invitation. The team leader, Senior Sergeant Volkov, considered the implications. An empty train was a curiosity, but a deliberate trap was a more pressing concern. German tactics often involved bait, drawing in Soviet patrols for ambush, and the stillness of this particular train felt too perfect. His unit, a 6-man reconnaissance team, was lightly armed, designed for observation and reporting, not for engaging armored targets or entrenched infantry. Their mission was to gather intelligence on German dispositions, not to initiate contact. He deployed his men in a wide flanking maneuver, 2 scouts to the north, 2 to the south, while he and Piotr approached the tracks from the west, using a small, frozen stream bed for cover. The objective was to ascertain the train's contents without revealing their presence. The tarpaulins, from a distance, seemed to sag in places, suggesting a bulky but not necessarily uniform cargo. The sheer scale of the silence, however, remained the most unsettling detail. As they drew closer, the details of the wagons became clearer. The flatbeds themselves were heavy-duty, reinforced, far more robust than typical rolling stock used for general supplies. This indicated a cargo of significant weight, contradicting the initial impression of an abandoned or lightly loaded transport. The tarpaulins, a faded field gray, were stretched taut in some sections, revealing sharp, angular forms beneath, while in others they billowed slightly with the wind, obscuring any precise identification. Piotr, now positioned closer to the tracks, reported a faint, metallic smell on the air, not of coal smoke or lubricants, but something more acrid, like stale exhaust fumes and diesel. He also noted the subtle sheen of paint beneath a tear in one of the tarpaulins, a dark, almost black hue, inconsistent with the usual drab greens or grays of German transport vehicles. The combination of heavy-duty wagons, the peculiar scent, and the obscured, angular shapes began to suggest a specific, disquieting possibility, one that contradicted the initial assessment of an empty or benign cargo. The train, it seemed, was not merely stationary. It was holding its breath. The first explosion, a shaped charge detonated against the tender, buckled the heavy steel plate with a sound like tearing canvas, momentarily silencing the chatter of small arms fire. The locomotive, severed from its fuel, began to coast, its momentum carrying it further into the ambush zone, a pre-selected stretch of track bordered by dense pine forest. Soviet scouts, positioned along the embankment, had anticipated a standard convoy, perhaps troop transports or supply wagons, their intelligence suggesting a routine logistical run. Their initial assessment, based on distant observation and the train's unremarkable profile, indicated an empty or lightly loaded freight. The long, low-slung flat cars, each covered by tarpaulins secured with ropes, offered no visible hint of their true cargo. Standard operating procedure for such a target dictated disabling the engine and then engaging any exposed personnel, followed by a detailed reconnaissance of the contents. The scouts, numbering 27 men, had prepared for a swift, decisive action, their primary weapons being PPS-43 submachine guns and a handful of captured German Panzerfausts. As the train ground to a halt, its wheels screeching against the rails, the scouts began to advance, maintaining cover in the undergrowth. They expected to encounter a skeleton crew, perhaps a few guards, easily overwhelmed. But then, with a hydraulic hiss that cut through the fading echoes of the initial blast, the side panels of the first flat car began to lower. These were not the simple canvas covers they had assumed, but hinged, armored ramps designed for rapid deployment. From within the shadows of the receding panels, a dark, angular silhouette emerged, followed by the distinctive, heavy clatter of steel tracks on steel. It was a Panzerkampfwagen 6 Ost H1, a Tiger I. Its 8.8 centimeter KWK 36 LF56 main gun traversing slowly, almost imperceptibly, towards the tree line. The vehicle, painted in a dark yellow base coat with disruptive green and brown camouflage, appeared remarkably intact, its formidable armor plating reflecting the dim light of the overcast morning. A second set of doors opened on the adjacent flat car, revealing another Tiger, then a third. The tactical surprise was absolute. Instead of empty wagons, the scouts faced a column of 3 operational heavy tanks, each weighing 56 metric tons, armed with a gun capable of penetrating 100 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. The intelligence failure was profound. What they believed to be a soft target was in fact a mobile armored deployment, a spearhead concealed within a logistical shell. The sudden appearance of such formidable firepower immediately shifted the engagement from an ambush to a desperate defense. The scouts, equipped primarily for anti-personnel and light vehicle engagement, found themselves staring down the barrels of tanks designed to withstand direct hits from most Soviet anti-tank weaponry of the period. The 3 Tigers, now fully disembarked, began to fan out, their engines rumbling to life, creating a low, guttural growl that resonated through the forest. Kursk Salient, July 1943. The initial reports from the reconnaissance patrols were fragmented, almost unbelievable in their implications. A train, seemingly abandoned on a spur line near Poniri, had yielded not the expected empty cargo wagons or captured supplies, but something far more menacing. The 1st Scout Team, a 3-man element from the 13th Guards Rifle Division, approached with standard caution, their PPSH-41 submachine guns at the ready. They had observed no movement for hours, only the metallic glint of the sun on the sealed boxcars. Their objective was simple: verify the contents, or lack thereof, and report back. As they neared the train, an unexpected hydraulic hiss preceded the slow descent of a side panel on one of the larger wagons. The sound was alien, a mechanical exhalation in the otherwise still morning. What emerged was not a common Panzer IV or a Stug III, but a vehicle of unprecedented scale and honor. The initial visual identification was stark: a main gun of immense caliber, a chassis of thick, angular plates, and a turret that seemed disproportionately large even for its massive hull. The scouts, trained to recognize the silhouettes of every known German armored vehicle, immediately understood they were facing something new, something far more dangerous than anything they had encountered in the preceding 2 years of conflict. Their immediate report, transmitted via a crude field radio, spoke of a heavy tank, unknown type, very large gun. This terse message, relayed up the chain of command, initiated a flurry of urgent communications across the entire Soviet front. Commanders, already bracing for a massive German offensive, recognized the gravity of this new intelligence. Subsequent observations from other forward elements confirmed the initial sighting. Damage reports from early skirmishes, compiled by the 5th Guards Tank Army, detailed the ineffectiveness of standard 76mm tank guns against these new adversaries. Rounds that would have crippled a Panzer III or IV were simply deflecting or failing to penetrate the thick frontal and side armor. Interrogation files from captured German personnel, often junior mechanics or support staff, provided the first definitive nomenclature: Tiger, or PZ Kapfvt Tiger aus E. These prisoners, often bewildered by their capture, spoke of the tank's 88mm main gun, its formidable armor, and its relatively slow operational speed. They also spoke of its complexity and the logistical challenges it presented. Production logs, later captured from Henschel and Porsche factories, revealed that only a limited number, approximately 1,347 units, would ever be manufactured. Yet, even in small numbers, their impact was disproportionate. The strategic implication was clear. The Germans were introducing a new class of heavy tank designed to dominate the battlefield, capable of engaging Soviet armor at ranges where the T-34 and KV-1 were virtually helpless. The sheer mass of the Tiger, often exceeding 56 tons in combat trim, presented an engineering marvel and a tactical nightmare. Its frontal armor, up to 100 millimeters thick, combined with a powerful 88mm TWK-36L56 gun, shifted the balance of armored engagements. Soviet tank crews, accustomed to closing to within 500 meters to ensure penetration, now faced an enemy capable of destroying them from over 1,500 meters away. This technological leap demanded a radical re-evaluation of Soviet anti-tank tactics and weapon development. Near Leningrad, January 1943. The Reconnaissance Patrol, a small detachment of the 30th Guards Rifle Division, moved cautiously through the snow-laden birch forest, their breath pluming in the frigid air. Their mission, a routine probing action, sought to confirm the withdrawal of German forces from a recently contested rail junction, a critical supply node that had seen heavy fighting for weeks. Compiled from aerial photography and prisoner interrogations, suggested a general disengagement, painting a picture of an orderly but definite retreat. The train itself, a long string of flat cars and covered wagons, sat silent and seemingly abandoned on a siding, half obscured by a drift of snow. Its presence was not unexpected. Retreating armies often left behind damaged rolling stock or used rail lines for temporary storage. The lead scout, Sergeant Ivan Volkov, signaled his men to fan out, their PPSH-41 submachine guns held ready, the cold metal biting into gloved hands. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of their boots on the frozen ground and the distant, almost imperceptible groan of the wind. As they approached the train, the sheer scale of the covered wagons became apparent. These were not typical freight cars. Their dimensions suggested something far heavier and more substantial than general cargo. Each wagon, a box-like structure of riveted steel plates, measured approximately 8.5 meters in length and stood nearly 3.5 meters high, significantly larger than standard German rolling stock. The absence of any visible markings or unit designations further heightened the patrol's unease, a deliberate obfuscation of contents. Volkov, a veteran of Stalingrad, felt a prickle of unease. He ordered 2 men to investigate the nearest wagon, their rifles raised, fingers resting lightly on the triggers. As they drew close, a faint metallic clinking sound, almost imperceptible, emanated from within. It was a sound of immense weight shifting, a subtle vibration that resonated through the frozen earth. Suddenly, with a pneumatic hiss, the side doors of the first wagon dropped inward, revealing not empty space, but the menacing silhouette of a Panzerkampfwagen V, Tiger Aust V, its 8.8 centimeter KWK-36L56 main gun. A weapon of formidable reputation, traversed slowly, its muzzle seeking targets. The armor, a thick carapace of rolled homogeneous steel, appeared impervious, a stark contrast to the thinner plates of the Panzer IVs and IIIs they had grown accustomed to facing. The Tiger, designated by its crew as 131, had been transported from the Henschel factory in Kassel, a journey of over 1,500 kilometers by rail. A testament to the logistical effort required to deploy such heavy units. Its 100mm frontal hull armor and 80mm turret front represented a qualitative leap in protection, rendering most Soviet anti-tank guns of the period ineffective at typical engagement ranges. The 76.2mm ZIS-3 divisional gun, the backbone of Soviet anti-tank defense, could penetrate the Tiger's side armor at close range, but only with tungsten-cored ammunition, a scarce commodity in early 1943. The shock was absolute. The scouts, accustomed to the relatively predictable engagements with lighter German armor, were confronted with a machine designed to dominate the battlefield. The Tiger's KWK-36, capable of penetrating 100 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters, outranged and outgunned virtually every Soviet tank in service. Its presence indicated a new and far more dangerous phase of the war on the Eastern Front, a shift in the tactical landscape that would demand entirely new doctrines and weapons. Recommendation: immediate withdrawal and detailed reporting on enemy heavy armor deployment. The initial field reports, scribbled on grimy paper and often stained with oil and mud, began their journey back from the reconnaissance patrols. These were raw observations, unrefined by analysis, detailing the unexpected encounter with the new German armor. Each dispatch carried the weight of a sudden, brutal shift in the tactical landscape, a new and dangerous variable introduced to the Eastern Front. These urgent messages were first consolidated at regimental intelligence offices, where clerks, working under the flickering light of paraffin lamps, transcribed the often illegible scrawl into standardized forms. They cataloged the approximate numbers, the observed characteristics, the thick frontal armor, the long gun, the distinctive track layout, and the devastating effect on Soviet T-34s and KV-1s. The initial reports often lacked precise nomenclature, referring to the vehicles simply as new heavy tanks or German monsters. From regimental headquarters, the compiled intelligence moved up to divisional and then army-level staffs. Here, dedicated intelligence officers, often veterans of earlier campaigns, began to piece together a more coherent picture from the disparate fragments. They cross-referenced accounts, looking for consistencies in reported dimensions, armament, and operational patterns. The sheer destructive power, described in multiple independent reports, suggested a significant technological leap by the Wehrmacht. Within 48 hours of the first sightings, a preliminary intelligence summary, designated Special Report Number 17, was dispatched from the 38th Army's Intelligence Section to the Intelligence Directorate of the Voronezh Front. This report, typed on a manual machine, contained an estimated silhouette sketch based on multiple eyewitness accounts and a provisional assessment of the new tank's capabilities, emphasizing its superior firepower and protection against existing Soviet anti-tank weapons. The Voronezh Front's intelligence staff, recognizing the gravity of the situation, immediately forwarded Special Report Number 17 to the main Intelligence Directorate, GRU, of the General Staff in Moscow. This transmission, carried by secure radio and sometimes by courier aircraft, was marked Top Secret, Urgent. It included an initial assessment that the new tank represented a qualitative advantage over current Soviet heavy armor, posing a substantial threat to planned offensive operations. In Moscow, at the GRU headquarters, a dedicated team of analysts began a more comprehensive examination. They correlated the field reports with existing intelligence on German tank development, searching for any prior indications of such a vehicle. Production logs from captured German factories, interrogation files from earlier prisoners, and aerial reconnaissance photographs were all scrutinized for clues, but the appearance of this new tank seemed to have largely escaped prior detection. The GRU's preliminary conclusion, reached within 72 hours of the first sightings, was stark. The German army had introduced a new heavy tank, later identified as the PZ Kapfau W6 Tiger. Possessing armor impervious to the 76.2mm gun of the T-34 and the 85mm gun of the KV-1 at standard combat ranges, and armed with a high-velocity 88mm main gun, capable of penetrating all current Soviet armor. This assessment was immediately relayed to Stavka, the Supreme High Command. Stavka's response was swift and decisive. Orders were disseminated across the front lines, instructing units to avoid direct engagement with the new heavy tanks whenever possible, and to prioritize flanking maneuvers or ambushes using massed anti-tank artillery. At the same time, design bureaus and armaments factories received urgent directives to accelerate the development of more powerful anti-tank guns and heavy tank designs capable of countering this new threat. The appearance of the Tiger had fundamentally altered the calculus of armored warfare on the Eastern Front. The initial reports from the scouts, corroborated by the shattered remnants of the ambush site, began to coalesce into a grim picture within the Stavka's intelligence apparatus. Analysts at the Main Intelligence Directorate, GRU, were tasked with synthesizing the scattered field observations, the often fragmented radio intercepts, and the preliminary damage assessments from the destroyed T-34s. The sudden appearance of such heavily armored vehicles, seemingly impervious to conventional anti-tank rounds, necessitated an immediate re-evaluation of German armored capabilities. The primary concern centered on the armor protection of these new tanks. Field reports indicated that 76.2 mm rounds from the F-34 tank gun, the standard armament of the T-34, had repeatedly failed to penetrate the frontal glacis plate, even at close ranges of 300 meters. Examination of recovered shell fragments and impact marks suggested a steel alloy of exceptional hardness and thickness, far exceeding anything encountered in the Panzer III or early Panzer IV models. The angled plates of the T-34, while effective against many German guns, appeared to be completely outmatched by this new design. Production logs from Eurowagenzawodd showed that the monthly output of T-34 tanks, averaging 1,200 units in late 1942, was predicated on the assumption of a qualitative parity with German armor. This new threat, however, shifted the calculus dramatically. A single Tiger, if reports were accurate, could effectively engage and destroy multiple T-34s before being neutralized, demanding a disproportionate expenditure of resources and lives. The sheer volume of Soviet tank production, while impressive, risked becoming a numerical advantage nullified by a qualitative deficit. The strategic implications extended beyond mere tank-on-tank engagements. The presence of such a heavily armored vehicle would fundamentally alter infantry tactics, requiring entirely new approaches to anti-tank defense and close-quarters combat. Conventional anti-tank rifles, such as the PTRD-41, with their maximum penetration of 35 mm at 100 meters, were rendered obsolete against the Tiger's 100 mm frontal armor. This necessitated a rapid acceleration in the development and deployment of heavier anti-tank artillery and specialized infantry anti-tank weapons. The ideological ramifications were equally profound. Soviet propaganda had consistently portrayed German armor as formidable but ultimately beatable through superior tactics and the inherent strength of the Red Army. The introduction of a tank that seemed invulnerable threatened to undermine this narrative, potentially impacting troop morale and public confidence. The psychological impact of encountering an enemy vehicle that could not be stopped by standard means was a factor that Stavka could not ignore. The immediate operational response focused on identifying the precise characteristics of this new tank and developing effective countermeasures. Intelligence summaries emphasized the need for captured examples to undergo thorough examination at Kubinka proving grounds. Until then, operational directives would stress caution, advising units to engage these new heavy tanks only with overwhelming force, preferably from the flanks or rear, and to prioritize the use of 122 mm artillery and air support. The shock of the Tiger's appearance initiated an immediate and comprehensive reevaluation within the Red Army's High Command. particularly in the realm of anti-tank warfare. Existing doctrines, honed against the PZ Kampfkampf and IV, proved woefully inadequate for this new threat. Initial field reports, often grim and fragmented, spoke of shells simply bouncing off the frontal glacis plate, a phenomenon previously encountered only with the heaviest fortifications. Technical intelligence units, working from captured fragments and detailed reconnaissance, quickly disseminated data on the Tiger's armor scheme. The frontal hull armor, a formidable 100 mm, presented an unprecedented challenge, while the turret front and gun mantlet, at 100 to 110 mm, offered little relief. This thick, vertically oriented plating rendered the 45 mm anti-tank gun obsolete for frontal engagements and severely limited the effectiveness of the ubiquitous 76 mm ZIS-3 divisional gun, even at close ranges. The primary anti-tank weapon, the 76.2 mm F-34 tank gun mounted on the T-34, possessed a muzzle velocity of 680 meters per second, with standard armor-piercing rounds. While effective against the side and rear armor of the Tiger at typical combat distances, its frontal penetration against 100 mm of homogeneous steel at a 90-degree angle was marginal, requiring engagement at less than 500 meters, often suicidally close. The 57 mm ZIS-2 anti-tank gun, with its higher velocity of 990 meters per second, offered a glimmer of hope, capable of penetrating 100 mm at 1,000 meters. But its production numbers were limited, and its high explosive round was less effective against infantry. Strategic adjustments began with an emphasis on ambush tactics, targeting the Tiger's vulnerable flanks and rear. Crews were instructed to disable the tracks first, immobilizing the behemoth before concentrating fire on the engine deck or the thinner side armor. Infantry anti-tank teams, equipped with PTRD-41 and PTRS-41 anti-tank rifles, found their weapons largely ineffective against the Tiger's armor, leading to a renewed focus on anti-tank grenades and Molotov cocktails for close-quarters assaults. A desperate measure. The necessity for heavier anti-tank guns became paramount. Development efforts accelerated on the 85 mm D5T gun, initially intended for a new heavy tank, to be adapted for the T-34 chassis, creating the T-34-85. This gun, firing an armor-piercing round at 792 meters per second, offered a significant improvement, capable of penetrating the Tiger's frontal armor at around 500 meters. Concurrently, the 122 mm A-19 gun, a powerful field artillery piece, was hastily adapted for tank mounting, leading to the IS-2 heavy tank, a direct response to the Tiger and Panther. Production logs from Wehrmacht and factory number 183 indicate a dramatic shift in output priorities, with emphasis moving away from smaller caliber anti-tank guns towards larger, more potent designs. The 85 mm gun, initially produced in limited quantities, saw its monthly output surge from 50 units in late 1943 to over 500 by mid-1944. This rapid industrial retooling reflected the urgency of the threat, a testament to the Soviet capacity for wartime adaptation. The doctrinal shift also extended to combined arms tactics, integrating artillery and ground attack aircraft more closely with anti-tank efforts, recognizing that no single weapon system could reliably defeat the Tiger alone. The sheer resilience of the Tiger forced a fundamental rethinking of every